Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Voice of Authority webinar brought to you today by Wilmot Dixon. My name is Toby Fox. I'm the Managing Director of 3Fox, the marketing agency for councils. And our job is to keep our network of councils and developers and investors and their influencers and advisors connected. Now, since pandemic began, we've been working through this online channel, the Voice of Authority, a platform for councils to discuss their ambitions and challenges and influences and issues of urgency. And today, and over a series of 3 webinars, our focus is turning to Hertfordshire, specifically the Hertfordshire Growth Board, founded in 2018, and the focus of this series of webinars over the next 4 months. Today, we're going to take the opportunity to update you on progress made by the Growth Board over the last year in delivering its programme. And what a programme. Up to 100,000 new homes are going to be built in Hertfordshire by the mid-2030s, and around 100,000 new jobs created. And the Growth Board is bringing political and civic and health and business leadership together to make sure that growth creates, maintains and strengthens sustainable, well-designed and thriving communities and respects and nurtures the environment. And it's doing that in the context of COVID-19. And we're going to look today at the impact of the pandemic on HGB's progress and also of changing leadership. And it's a great pleasure in that respect to welcome to the Voice of Authority today, Councillor Richard Roberts, who's leader of Hertfordshire County Council and the chair of Hertfordshire Growth Board. And as well as introducing Richard today and reviewing the HGB's year, we're going to be looking ahead to the Growth Board's ambitions for 2022 and beyond. And we're very fortunate to be doing that in the company of Councillor Sharon Taylor, OBE, who is leader of Stevenage Borough Council, and Councillor Chris White, who's leader of St Albans City and District Council, and also Patsy Dell, who's director of Hertfordshire Growth at the Hertfordshire Growth Board, and Richard Davidson, director of new business in London and the East at Wilmot Dixon. Now, panel, make the most of viewers, make the most of this panel and fire in your questions through the Q&A function, and we'll address as many of those as we can during the course of the conversation. And we've also got a few polls for you, so you can contribute to our discussion by responding to those when they pop up on your screen. And here's one to start you off. And it's sort of getting to the point rather quickly. On a scale of 1 to 5, what is your awareness of the Growth Board? Now, viewers, while you're answering that, we'll kick off the conversation with Councillor Roberts. Richard, what are growth boards and why is it so important for Hertfordshire to have one?
Hi, Toby. It's really important, and before we had it, we probably didn't realise we needed one. But it brings together, I think, as you said in your introduction, the leadership of place right across Hertfordshire. So we have 10 districts and we have 1 county council. So we've got the 11 leaders of place, if you will, and of the resources to support our residents of 1.2 million people in that place. And along with Paul Bairstow, the independent chairman of the Integrated Care System or Health in Hertfordshire, and Charles Amies from Home England, we have brought together some leadership of place and the means so that we can address the growth agenda. And I think now that we're statutory, from which we've been since earlier this year, we're really in the right place to start having the conversations with the backing of 1.2 million people behind us, with government, with the private sector, and if you like, with the civic realm as well. I think that's why we need a growth board.
Great stuff. Well, we're doing a job here, Richard, because 15% of our viewers aren't aware of the Growth Board yet. So hopefully through this webinar and this series of webinars, we can really start spreading the word about the work that you're doing. Now, we're going to talk tomorrow in our one-to-one interview on Ask the Voice of Authority, which is at 11 a.m. tomorrow morning, about the priorities on your wish list and the main kind of challenges that Hertfordshire faces in your view and how they synchronise with your ambitions for the Growth Board. And viewers, details of that live interview are going into the chat now, so you can register for that. But today, I'd really like to focus on the budget. That's the sort of burning question from last week, isn't it? So did the autumn budget deliver for Hertfordshire?
Well, I think it has delivered right across how government delivers into the public sector. And we're looking at growth in all sectors for the next 3 years. I think that certainty of funding is really, really important. We'd also know that we're not going to be capped on council tax above 3%, for example, would be 2% on a general taxation and perhaps 1% for an adult social care precept. And I think that gives us the right balance of managing an inflationary environment, an environment where there are significant pressures there, particularly around wages and employees. We have full employment in Hertfordshire, which is as high as it's ever been. Unemployment is down at 4%. So really, we just need the wherewithal to make sure that our public services can be delivered over the next 3 years. And I actually think that that is the case. I'm actually pleased with where the government has gone with its budget.
I'd be quite interested to know from our other panelists if you'd like to sort of raise your hand and comment on aspects of the budget and whether it delivered for your individual places as well.
Yeah,
but in the meantime, Chris, do you want to come straight in on that?
Having looked at the briefings I'm getting from the District Councils Network, which is the group of districts, that particular tier, working together and analysing the budget, an awful lot of the money which was promised loudly on Wednesday goes towards paying things like the increase in national insurance contributions to pay for the NHS and social care. So we are, shall we say, unexcited at the moment about the degree to which it's going to help us balance our budget. And don't forget, COVID is not nothing. In common with many districts, all councils, but many districts in particular, we have lost a huge amount of money through off-street parking, no longer being used by people during various lockdowns, and we've lost a massive amount in terms of leisure. I will be astonished if Stevenage had a wildly different story to tell. So jury's out at the moment, and certainly the jury's out as to whether there is going to be an acknowledgement that a county like Hertfordshire is a massive engine for growth. I believe we pay £40 billion worth of taxes. It does seem sensible to try and encourage that to get bigger for the sake of everybody. Thanks, Chris. So the jury's out and the jury's sceptical, I think. Sharon, what would you like to add to that?
Well, of course, I welcome the certainty, but if the certainty is more of the difficult struggle we've had in local government. We've had years and years of cuts now since 2010. We face, and Chris talked about the District Councils Network. I look after finance for that organisation. We face a triple whammy of significant increases in inflation on things like utilities and so on. We've got an outstanding pay claim, which is not resolved yet. And then we've got the kind of ongoing cost of COVID and the reductions in income that we've all experienced in district councils. So we've had the triple whammy of that coming on top of years of austerity. So I think Chris is right. The jury's out on whether we're going to get the support we need. On top of that, we've got COP26 going on this week. There are huge costs associated with doing what we all need to do to mitigate climate change. So I would have liked to have seen a big announcement on that. Maybe that will come during COP or after it. But without that, it's difficult to see how we do all of the things we need to do to mitigate the climate change.
Thanks, Sharon. Well, that's a really, really good point, isn't it? Because the other really timely thing happening at the moment, COP26, the Chancellor signalled his support for the green agenda in the budget. But in light of COP26, Richard, how green is Hertfordshire?
We took the climate emergency policy through our council 2 years now. And so have been building up quite a significant team of expertise and people through the Sustainability Partnership, which is again across Hertfordshire with all districts engaged at all levels. And it has to be at all levels. And driving that agenda. I mean, I think Sharon is absolutely right. If we're going to make the biggest difference, which is, for example, insulating and reducing the energy usage of schools, we will need funding which runs into hundreds of millions of pounds. And we simply do not, none of us have that in our back pockets at the moment. But those are the challenges. I think those are the key messages we want to come out of COP26. What are the really big statements? What is the certainty created for our investment community across Hertfordshire? What become the red lines or the lines in the sand, if you like, about what will be the standards we expect new development to be built to, or in fact how we can retrofit our homes and supporting that. For example, the £6,000 towards electric. Help me out here.
gas heaters, the heat pumps.
The heat pumps, that's right, air source heat pumps. That has got to happen. But I think the more certainty we have, the more absolutism and tying into building control as well. You know, are we going for carbon neutral development? Or are we going for 75, 80%? I think that the certainty and the funding will really help drive the investment into Hertfordshire.
Great stuff. Thanks, Richard. Well, let's have a look in slightly more detail at the work of the Growth Board. Patsy, you're Director of Hertfordshire Growth at the Growth Board. Can you give us a sort of quick rewind over the last 12 months over what's been achieved since we last spoke, and perhaps what maybe highlight some of the greatest successes so far? Your greatest hits, Patsy.
Thanks, Toby. And I think we've done some really, really good things. The maturing of the relationships amongst the members of the board at all levels, really, the chief execs group, that working as a system in Hertfordshire is something I think, we should all be really proud of. And you don't get that overnight. And we've had changes of political control and things have carried on. We've carried on working through throughout COVID, not losing, focus on what the Growth Board is there for and the work programme that we've got. So I think start of 2021, we changed the governance of the Growth Board into a statutory committee. And anyone who's tried to make those changes through 11 councils, full council meetings, will know the political capital and support it actually requires to make a change like that. So that's a really a really important change that we should be proud of. And we've extended the governance to have, as Richard has said, the independent chair of the ICS and a director from Homes England. So, I think as a body, we're stronger in 2021. We really understand our housing pipeline now and the challenges and issues we have in getting behind that 100,000 homes that need to be delivered in Hertfordshire. So we've got a really good understanding, and through a new body we've just set up, the Hertfordshire Infrastructure and Development Board, we're getting close to the sector that actually does a lot of that delivery. We're trying to work through the problems that we have and increasing faster delivery of the homes that Hertfordshire need. So there, I would say three of the important things we've done. We've spent a lot of time engaging with government, demonstrating our ambition, making sure they understand the programmes we've got in place around our two strategic east-west growth corridors, one in the north and one in the south, and our varied work programme that's doing things like, that Sharon's going to talk about, community wealth building. We're delivering joint plans. So we've moved quite a lot further this year with the plan for North East and Central Hertfordshire, getting that underway and really looking at commissioning work on growth study. So our ambition isn't the next 10 years, it's trying to take that longer perspective. And I think the highlights for me are the convening power of the Growth Board around place, economy, really working hard with the LEP. So making sure we've got clarity about the interventions, where we can add value to the work that the Hertfordshire districts, boroughs, county, LEP are already doing, but using our convening power and that engagement with government to add value, take a long-term perspective. So I'm really proud of what we've done in 2021 so far. It's
really difficult though, isn't it, Patsy? Because from the outside, that's pretty dry stuff. It's not like you've built 10,000 homes or anything like that. And you're always treading this sort of fine line, aren't you? Because you have to do all the preparatory work. This is laying down the foundations for all the growth that's to come. And from the outside, that doesn't look very exciting or very fast moving. But if you ignore that and go straight to the quick wins, the things that get everyone excited, then you'll be accused later on of not preparing and planning properly when things go wrong. So you're in a sort of slightly difficult place at the beginnings, aren't you? What do you want? Where do you want to be in a year from now? When we talk about your greatest hits a year from now, what would you like to be saying?
I think it would be great if Hertfordshire has a new relationship with government. We've had powers devolved so that the things we're already doing, we can do faster and with greater certainty. So delivering some of our infrastructure. We were just talking about, what are we doing about climate and COP26? We've got ambitious plans for a Hertfordshire Essex rapid transit system that will provide active travel alternatives for east-west travel in Hertfordshire. And that will really underpin future growth. And if something like that isn't a kind of sexy infrastructure project that, we're really ambitious about delivering, I don't know what is. So I think, having that new relationship with government and the means and certainty about how we deliver the infrastructure that our growth needs are some of the key things I want to see us getting more certainty on in 2022. I think balancing up the ambitions of the climate change and sustainability partnership with actual growth on the ground in Hertfordshire, so moving that closer, so that's a golden thread of work of the Growth Board as well. Clarity about our investment offer to the investment community who see big opportunities in Hertfordshire, and they're already here in the film and creative media sector. We've had fantastic investment in Hertfordshire's potential there, and the same at Stevenage, at GSK, with Airbus. To quote the Prime Minister, you know, Stevenage is the Cape Canaveral of the UK. So we've great things going on. We want to get that message out about we're a great place to do business. You know, we've got that convening power of political world, business world, the civic world, working together to help and support that. So, you know, I think similar message, but different things by the end of 22 about the force for good that is the Growth Board.
The audience certainly seems to agree with you. So there's one person out there who apparently thinks the Growth Board isn't going to be very important in delivering Hertfordshire's ambitions. So perhaps they'll have changed their mind too by the end of this session.
If they want to get in touch.
Yeah, well, if you want to, whoever you are, if you want to put your details in the chat, we'd be really happy to respond. Patsy, what sort of, can you be clear with the audience, what sort of timescales are we looking at to deliver these great ambitions?
So as you'd expect with a place agenda, there's sort of short, medium and longer term. So some of our interventions might be, you know, a study. So we understand how much new screen floor space is needed in Hertfordshire so that our planning authorities can incorporate that in, working with the LET, we can think about how we manage to deliver that floor space, or the skills agenda, how we make sure we benefit from our really successful clusters. Medium term might be laying the foothold for placemaking and increasing the work we need to do around our housing pipeline. And longer term are these joint strategic plans we're thinking about. So growth in Hertfordshire post 2030, but up to 2050. So I think it's a multi-dimensional task that the Growth Board is thinking about. And it's important we do think in terms of short, medium and long-term interventions. Then we're actually, you know, bearing down on the issues that matter and the challenges that are important to Hertfordshire that we come together and work on.
We're gonna turn in a second to Chris and talk about collaborations in order to deliver all that. But there are a couple of questions coming through from the audience that are focused around what Richard's already mentioned, indeed Chris and Sharon as well, around net zero. So how far can you go, Patsy, as a growth board in ensuring that all new build, including housing, is net zero in use standard? And there's another question that was Les Carter, and Roger Felix Lovegrove is asking something very similar. You know, can you ensure that the private sector developers stick to zero carbon building standards?
Well, I think we obviously have to have a policy and a legal position. So there will be government standards. They're reviewing, you know, the building regulations. So if we have that as a kind of a baseline position, but I think if we want to push for better than that, we need to be close to the industry. We need to have that real understanding of, you know, what motivates and drives them, how we can help to make that happen. So our new infrastructure and development board will be really important in that influencing relationship, how we make that happen in a different way. I think we've got to use the powers that we've got in Hertfordshire. So our own house building programs by our stockholding and non-stockholding councils. We have a number of housing development companies in Hertfordshire. So we, you know, any levers and opportunities for influence, we need to be deploying our efforts around those, I think, to drive that agenda faster and higher than we otherwise would. And that's the convening power, I think, of the Growth Board to try and use its influence, you know, to get those outcomes.
Thanks for that, Patsy. I mean, we're lucky enough to have Richard here from Wilmot Dixon. And Richard, how essential is it that local authorities, that planning authorities are imposing sort of guidance and restrictions on development to ensure net zero carbon? I mean, the private sector delivering without that?
I was going to be very careful with the word imposing, Toby, because Patsy was right to talk about legal powers. I know I've had discussions, I think with Patsy and a couple of others, around making sure that the right training is in place for the planners and also councillors that sit on planning committees for them to make better and more informed choices. And I think that's where we talk about the levers that we can pull. I think there's something about leadership from the local authorities commissioning their own zero carbon developments. You have to go out on a limb, I think, sometimes, and bold, strong, courageous leadership, which is a theme of a discussion the other week, I think is what's needed. And I think the Hertfordshire Growth Board gives us that focal point, somewhere we can kind of go to and say, look, we've got this really great idea, or we've done it here before. What do you think? How does that work in your portfolio? And then just picking up on the other point around that is, private sectors, the private businesses, we want longer term planning. It gives us surety to invest in skills and technology and growth for our business on our local supply chain. The one point that wasn't made earlier was actually the application from the colleges and the university around the Institute for Technology, which will really bring together kind of the construction sector. It brings together GSK or pharmaceuticals, and it also brings in some of that great technology we have with the likes of the businesses. We talked about Airbus, we could talk about MBDA, we could talk about Ocado. Those are great tech companies. If we come together, that's where that collaboration happens. And then, we've got the ingredients. We've talked about it before. So
thanks, Richard. On that note, Chris, let's talk a bit about collaboration between the local authorities. How do cross-border development collaborations within the county and beyond help boost the economy and accelerate that delivery of housing?
Well, I think the easiest way to answer that is to imagine a world in which we didn't do that. So St Albans just sat talking to itself, didn't talk to any of its neighbours, waved or threw bricks occasionally at the county council, and had to look up LEP in a dictionary every time it came up. That's nonsense, but sadly, it's not that far from where we have been in the not too distant past. So it obviously makes more sense for councils and other organisations, and Richard listed a few a moment ago, than not to do so. To give you an example, St Albans district is a minor player in the film world. We have a cathedral, and all sorts of people have got married. It's appeared in the Crown, you name it. We have various streets which appear frequently in soaps or whatever. So a minor player, but it matters a bit. We also know, though, in some detail, by talking to our colleagues and neighbours, that there are major players in Hertfordshire, Watford, Three Rivers, Hertsmere hugely. And we know over the border that there are still Pinewood Studios, which I think Apple is investing in as we speak. Knowing all of that means that we remember when we're doing, for instance, say St Albans local plan, that there are many people living in St Albans who will be working in those industries. I mean, I know someone, a husband of a cousin of mine, who works in Stevenage in the industries there. If you do a St Albans plan which doesn't recognise life sciences, then you're not doing it properly. But we've also got to work together and say very strongly to government what is not helping. I think one of the things that's beginning to worry me increasingly is permitted development. And I know Sharon raised that only the week before last to the Minister. It's worrying me because we have historically lost office space in St Albans because of that, and now we're losing industrial units because of permitted development. We need powers. And we have to say to government, the permitted development is all very well in dealing with the short-term desire for low cost and often low quality additional accommodation for residential purposes. In the medium term and the long run, it is potentially a disaster. And it is undermining the ability of councils and other organisations to plan for the future. Frankly, it's also undermining the ability of the LEP to push money in the right direction. So if we get nothing else from government as a result of its current thinking, if we don't get lots of cash, which I fear may be the case, then having some powers to deliver will be hugely helpful. But we're not hearing enough of that yet. We are having discussions, but we haven't had a yes yet.
How do you see the balance between those powers being delivered through the Growth Board compared to delivered through your own institution, through the district council, city and district council?
One of the problems with the two-tier system, which is and is the fine way of driving everyone off the webinar if I start talking about that for too long, is that it's immensely complicated to understand. Is that St Albans can have all sorts of great ideas about where housing goes, and indeed trying to make housing more carbon neutral and so forth. But without the county council thinking alongside us about highways, about the location of schools, this becomes a stupid conversation. So we can't do these things in isolation, and we can't do the environment in isolation. We need the powers, and Richard was very careful to avoid the word impose, but sooner or later planning authorities are going to have to say, sorry, you're putting in a gas boiler, you don't get planning permission. Sorry, we can't do that yet. We need to have that power.
So in that way, that the Growth Board is really helping you deliver your own aims, the climate emergency and so on, the agenda that you're setting out locally. How important is the Growth Board to St Albans?
Well, it is terribly important to St Albans because we got ourselves in a heck of a muddle a few years ago over the rather bizarre concept of duty to cooperate, which when I saw it turn up in the legislation, I was thinking, oh, that's going to end up in court. Little did I know how much it would end up in court as far as St Albans was concerned. So if you don't respond to an approach from another authority within 3 months, is that failure? Or is it 5 months? Or is it 6 months? Or is it the wrong answer to that initial? All of that nonsense. And what we've got actually is a group of people who actually, at both an officer level and at a member level, know each other. And we meet for various purposes at least once a fortnight. I am seeing the two colleagues on the screen in 3 dimensions tomorrow evening at the Hertfordshire Growth Board meeting, where we're going to go through a number of issues. And it has transcended, as far as you ever can, party political differences. So councils are very good at spotting how they're different from everybody else. Stevenage and St Albans are very different places. They have different politics, and yet we're frequent in the same room, and 90% of the time we're on the same side. And it's remarkable. You've got 6 Conservative leaders, 3 Lib Dem leaders, 2 Labour leaders, constantly working together. I think that's what the public actually want.
How does that? We've got a question in here from Nigel Palmer, and obviously you've got that kind of positive aligned agenda, but that comes up against local attitudes as well, which might be different from the Growth Board. So, how Nigel's asking, how do you push your growth initiatives forward against often difficult planning views from individual districts and boroughs? It's getting at that sort of difference between looking at the big picture and looking at the very local picture, Chris.
Well, it is to a degree. The planning system is hopelessly bureaucratic, particularly when it comes to planning inspectors dealing with local plans. And there are those not on the panel who can tell horrendous stories about running into difficulties with planning inspectors, and we did in St Albans. So that doesn't help. And I'm increasingly querying their role, when actually what matters is getting things done. What people are particularly worried about, it's, for instance, when it comes to Greenbelt, is coalescence between settlements which currently are separate, and therefore they worry about losing identity, which is what happened in Middlesex, as we know, over the previous decades. But they're more worried about infrastructure. It's funny that the word infrastructure, which is a technical word, is actually well understood by the public. They are worried about school provision, probably unnecessarily, because that normally comes through. They're worried about transport. And that is a very, very valid concern. And indeed, the Growth Board is coming up with one set of options for dealing with the increasing transport. But we've got the nonsense now of a journey at 8:45 in the morning between Watford and St Albans is a complete nightmare. You just don't do it if you could possibly avoid it. In fact, it's 20 minutes at other times of the day. But the roads are congested. There is a railway line between the two, but it's single track, and therefore there's a train once every 3/4 of an hour, and you can't operate like that. That's one of the things that we want the powers to be able to address, to get cars off the road in a way that people actually want to happen. But also on top of that, as climates become more important and recognised as people's probably number one worry, as it should be, they want to know that new settlements are going to be green in every sense. There's going to be electric car charging points. There's not going to be gas boilers, and so on and so forth. And we're going to use renewable energy. People will be happier about growth if all of that is clearly addressed. And at the moment, we can't guarantee it because we don't necessarily have the powers.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed for that, Chris. And Patsy and Richard both nodding furiously at what you're saying. Patsy, I'm going to come to you to just add anything that you'd like to that, but also the housing has often been labelled as infrastructure. You know, there are some calls for it to be described as infrastructure rather than as part of that infrastructure package. And there's a question in from I think an organisation called Serenity, which is asking about how who at the board they should be talking to discuss housing for elderly residents, for senior citizens, and that's clearly part of the sorts of things that local people are going to be worried about with growth, isn't it? Patsy, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, no, we'd be happy to, if they would like to get in touch with myself or just contact us through the Growth Board website. I think we'd be really interested to know, that what they're doing, what they could do for Hertfordshire. That's an area we've all got an interest in, housing, as we get older. So happy to talk, be really interested to hear from them. So please get in touch.
Thanks, Patsy. Now, let's look at what this infrastructure is supposed to be supporting. Now in Stevenage, you've got a huge amount of private sector investment, Sharon, going into the cell and gene and advanced manufacturing sectors. So how is that evolving, and how is the Growth Board leveraging in that? What's the role of the Growth Board in delivering it?
Well, thank you, Toby. And I just wanted to echo particularly what the previous speakers have said about this working together thing being absolutely key to what we're doing. As we worked through COVID together and tackled it together, it was very clear. We worked together before that, but I think COVID has kind of crystallised some of this. It's very clear that we've all got more in common than the stuff which divides us, whether that's politically or whether it's about our different places. And I think we owe it to the people in our communities now to carry on building on that foundation. And the two very key clusters for the economy in Hertfordshire are the media, film, TV in the south of the county. And in my part of the county, this fantastic and emerging science, cell and gene therapy, space science, and so on. I'm incredibly proud of Stevenage and that growing reputation we're getting as a STEM city. And I think Richard nicked my line that the Prime Minister had said that we are the Cape Canaveral of the UK here in Stevenage with our space science. We've got outstanding, thriving businesses here, including Airbus, producing a quarter of all the world's satellites right here in Stevenage. And this is exciting stuff that you spoke, Toby, about the fact that some of the Growth Board stuff can be a bit dry, but this is the exciting part of it, cutting edge work of advanced manufacturing firms, life-saving healthcare sector, Airbus building a fabulous new headquarters facility on their Stevenage site now, all finished now, and they've got the Mars rover exhibition that you can go and have a look at. Great commitment to our local economy, and of course companies like MBDA in the defence sector continuing to prosper. You talked a bit about the life sciences sector, and that's really taking off now. We've got 1.6 billion private investment raised by firms based in Stevenage. That's venture capital coming into our county, and the potential for the life sciences sector to be one of the largest in Europe. And we've got an amazing base to build from with the national catapult in the town. That's, the incredible work that's being done there. When I talk to people about it, they do get excited. This is using our own DNA to go, they take it out of your body, they do stuff to it, don't ask me what, and they put it back in, and it will tackle cancer, it will repair stroke damage. It's incredible work that's being done there. And supporting and scaling up the manufacture of that transformational early stage treatments. And then a bioscience catalyst to help bring forward great innovation home to one of GSK's 2 R&D sites, and equally to across our local partnership, Growth Board, the local enterprise partnership. We're doing an enormous amount on skills under the leadership of Adrian Hawkins on our skills board. Deep commitment that these businesses will create local jobs and opportunity for the town. Aspiration for our young people, and the Generation Stevenage project is working hard on that as we speak. And the progress that's made is quite stunning. I'm always jealous of my European colleagues in my twin towns at the speed they're able to operate, because they don't get bogged down in some of the central local government stuff we have here. And GSK have indicated their intention to develop their site into a leading European life sciences campus, 400 million of investment that could create 4,000 jobs here. And just on Friday last week, we completed a deal to bring the European HQ for Autolus into Stevenage Town Centre, 65 million cutting edge facility to produce treatments for life-limiting cancer. We have the groundbreaking ceremony for that on the 8th of November. And, you know, if it wasn't for the Growth Board and the partnership working we've done on this, the directors worked very closely with our partnership. And I think it's fair to say they were very daunted at first by the shape of the public sector here and how that might slow them down. Discussions opened through government with the International Trade Team, the LEP, the Growth Board, our Stevenage Development Board under Adrian Hawkins, our chair, Herts County Council colleagues and the Stevenage team. And from being approached with the idea in the early spring to securing planning consent in July, completing the commercials, starting on site in October, and we're doing the groundbreaking next week, I think that shows the power of the Growth Board in bringing us together to get this life sciences work stream really pushing forward for Hertfordshire. I could go on, Toby, but I think that's probably enough of a flavour of what we've been doing.
Sharon, there's some fabulous outcomes in there, and they're arriving now. You know, this isn't sort of waiting for 20 years. But there is a sense, isn't there, in which probably not our viewers today, but certainly many of your residents and voters will be looking at that and saying, well, a quarter of all satellites in the world being made in Stevenage, that's fantastic news. But it's fantastic for big business, isn't it? It's fantastic for big corporations and the tech giants and so on. What does that actually mean for me? And I'd be interested to find out a bit about how you're making sure that the growth that the Growth Board is delivering is creating an inclusive and resilient economy, and what role the Growth Board is playing in doing that.
Well, you know, the County Council's strapline for Hertfordshire is County of Opportunity. We wanted to see through the Growth Board that was genuinely true for the people of the county, for businesses in the county, and to make sure that, you know, the fantastic jobs that are being created in our county in both of those key sectors and elsewhere were there for the people of Hertfordshire. So I'm really passionate about this topic, that the wealth created in our thriving economy stays local and improves those opportunities for local people. So we've seen several other local authorities in Hertfordshire partner with us on this, and we're taking this work forward through the North East and Central programme for the Growth Board. And this is really simple for me: creating jobs, leveraging local contracts, upskilling and strengthening our local training, and that creates outstanding results. And the dividend is very clear: better skills in our local workforce, fantastic aspirations among our young people to work in those very key sectors that we've got here, more money in the local economy, a more sustainable approach, and reinvestment back into Hertfordshire. And the challenge through the Growth Board is for that strategy to be bold enough, ambitious enough, and sustainable enough. It's about creating those high quality, healthy places that are properly connected and digitally enabled, because that's important too. We mustn't forget one of the key infrastructure elements is the digital elements. And through the Growth Board, we've bid now for £700,000 funding from the Community Renewal Fund. We had hoped we'd hear about it fairly quickly. Then we got an answer to a question in the House of Commons last week that we should know last week, which we haven't. Hopefully that answer will come soon, and we'll get that funding to strengthen this approach, which enables the work we're doing. And, you know, as I said, very grateful to Wilmot Dixon, who are one of our local companies. They're helping us with the town centre regeneration that we've got going at the moment. They put on a very key set of seminars with Jonathan Porritt, a world-renowned environmental campaigner, to make sure that as we turn our minds in a more focused way to tackling climate change, there will be fantastic opportunities coming out of that as well. And I think in the development that we've got in Hertfordshire, we can make good use of that to empower and enrich all of our communities.
That's amazing, amazing stuff. Now, look, Sharon, you're raising expectations. Seriously, half our audience are expecting all of this. Well, they're expecting the Growth Board to be delivering inclusive growth in the medium term, not the long term, or indeed never. So expectations are high. How much has, and I'll broaden this out to all the panelists after you, Sharon. How much has COVID-19 impacted your delivery program and the way that the Growth Board's managing those expectations?
Well, I think it's had a mixed effect. You know, that there have been challenges, particularly for the construction sector. But you know, we've got £1 billion town centre project underway, as most people are aware. We had a short hiatus at the beginning where we had to wait for the construction industry standards for operating during COVID. But we've cracked on and got work done. We've built homes during the COVID crisis here in Stevenage. We've carried on with our town centre regeneration programme and delivered a massive piece of work, first of all, creating the co-space, flexible working space right in the heart of our town centre, and a big development at Queensway North. So it has had an impact, there's no doubt about that. And now, of course, we do have some supply chain issues which are causing an issue. But I think this is the benefit of all working together. We all work together on these things. We work on how we're going to tackle the challenges that appear, whether they're COVID related or otherwise. And you know, it's that working together that gives us the strength we need. And you know, delivery hasn't stood still in Hertfordshire over the COVID period. I think it's really important to say that. And it's given us actually some space to do some of the key development of the infrastructure plans and so on that we're going to need going forward.
Thanks, Sharon. Chris, is that the same in St Albans, that you've actually had a sort of breathing space as a result of COVID?
Not really. I think we have continued. I mean, the supply issues are a worry, although the current significant regeneration project, they managed to get their materials in early and have put them somewhere secure and safe. But we worry about the future. The breathing space, in fact, we needed was to redesign what we'd inherited from a previous administration, which we used. But now COVID has really not helped, although it has changed the way that we work in useful ways. I think trundling into the office all the time is something none of us are going to do anymore. But it's also raised question marks about the future. One of the things, of course, is whether there is a permanent shift in the way that people work. I suspect there is, and I'm hearing from everyone else there is. That, of course, has a significant impact on your local plan, given that what St Albans does probably, I would say best, I don't want to be competitive though unnecessarily, is hospitality. And I think the hospitality industry is going to, subject to staff shortages, of course, it'd be one of the things that will expand as people spend less time in London.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Sharon, I'll come back to you in just a second. I think you wanted to raise another point, but Richard, I just first wanted to get a view across the county of the effect of COVID in terms of how it's affected the kind of growth plans, the delivery plans.
We've actually kept going. I think it's great testimony to the board and to its partners, and of course the really close links to the LEP that actually it's been delivering all the way through the pandemic. The new river bridge that enabled brand new walking, cycling, and then access for everything from white vans to HGVs going into Hoddesdon Business Park, delivered on time and to budget only last month, is testimony to that great work. And of course the A120 bypass around Little Haddon, which is both got its water catchment work as well as its bypass, is just exemplary. That has had little cost overruns because of COVID and because of the weather. And then, of course, we've got the A602 going up to Stevenage with its improvements, with the cycleway as well as the highway improvements there. So I don't think that COVID per se has slowed it down. I just say, I don't know whether it's appropriate to mention it here, but the COVID recovery work, which is so important now, the County Council's already got nearly 10 million going in to facilitate, whether it's the skills agenda or whether it's supporting families who are really struggling with mental health and all sorts of issues coming out of COVID. That is already hitting the ground and is already being spent. So I think we're in a great place to build the agenda from here on post-COVID, and it has to be a consideration post-COVID. Picking up some of the points that Chris just made, we are in a different place. We aren't all going to go to the office 5 days a week, but we have got to find that balance between staying open and encouraging investment in and having businesses being able to thrive both in the hospitality sector, but obviously right across that commercial opportunity.
Thanks, Richard. I'll come to you, Patsy, in a second and ask you how that point exactly, how that's affected your growth and delivery plans at the Growth Board. But Sharon, you wanted to make a comment on what Chris was saying?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk briefly about retail and the impact on retail, because obviously there was a very sudden and difficult impact on retail, which was already under pressure from online retail. But we'd been preparing for that here in Stevenage, and I'm sure they had in other parts of the county as well. Our regeneration project is focused on a diversification of our town centre, and all our high streets will be thinking about this, that you need to look at flexible working space in our town centres. So, yeah, you might not be going into London 5 days a week, but you might not want to work at home either. So somewhere where you can go and work in a professional environment is helpful. More leisure in our town centres, more hospitality outlets. So, you've got there are things to do there. There are things to take the children to do, and I think all our high streets will be looking at that. We'd already designed our new town centre project around those kind of principles, but COVID has really made them come to the fore. Also, the issues around some of our green infrastructure, cycling and walking, has become much more important during this time. The fantastic green spaces we've got here in Hertfordshire, which people always did value, but I think they've become even more valued. And one of the bits of work we do in the Growth Board is looking at how we've got all this housing development to do, but we also want to preserve the nature of Hertfordshire, because one of the great benefits of living here is the fantastic green spaces we've got. So we've all been thinking about that as well. So it's just that the COVID crisis has kind of probably accelerated some of the things we were going to do anyway. And I do think that the joint working we've done on COVID, we've got our fantastic Director of Public Health here in Hertfordshire, Jim McManus, who's he's led the work, but all of the leaders of the councils and Richard and previously David as leaders of the county council have worked very hard together to manage this process, and I think very effectively. And now we're working on the recovery process together.
Absolutely, thanks, Sharon. Chris, you wanted to add something, and I should probably add that I spent a couple of days. I was lucky enough to spend a couple of days cycling around St Albans about a month ago, and the lifestyle is certainly hugely attractive post pandemic.
Yes, I mean, we have a cafe society, which in a country with our weather is quite remarkable. But in one sense, that is slightly secondary. As you know, Toby, before we actually went live, we talked about a number of contingency plans if one of the panel dropped off because of a failure of broadband or equipment. Now, so far, so good. But I think it does underline the fact that we are now in an online world, and the coverage of broadband, and particularly fibre optic broadband, is not anything like good enough to sustain an online economy. And we really do have to do that. And I'm delighted to say that the LEP, and we work incredibly well with the LEP, are doing good work in assessing the weak spots and filling them in, because this is the future. The future arrived rather earlier, I think. Quite a lot of people may not have actually known about Zoom 2 years ago. We all have to use Zoom, and that's fine. But it can be very wobbly, as we all know. So far, as I say, so good, but I've now tempted fate, so the whole thing will crash and burn in a second, I guess.
Chris, it's fine. It's all your fault. Richard, we've heard from the public sector on the effects of COVID, and several times the construction sector was mentioned. What has been the real effect on Wilmot Dixon's sort of delivery of the infrastructure projects that Hertfordshire needs?
I think it's quite a good point, really. I think there's an observation there about how we kind of got some standards together, which was actually where the whole industry collaborated. So we all came under the Construction Leadership Council and worked together, which was really remarkable for a sector that's not known necessarily for collaboration and innovation. But I think that's what we learned from the COVID process, is that we knew we needed to, we know we need to get better. We know we need to speed up. And I think what happened is that happened overnight. And so this idea of being able to work remotely, being able to work online, being able to change our processes, that sped up what probably would have taken 10 years, happened within 1 year. And there's some real benefits from that. So I think what we've seen is the opportunity to innovate, the opportunity to try some new things out, to get all of our people online within 1 week was remarkable, but it happened. So yeah, there was a little bit of a downturn, but actually we didn't have to close any of our sites, certainly in this region. Some of that comes down to just a good health and safety culture as well, where people recognise and respect that it's there to protect you and your colleagues. So I think we worked hard. It's helped us to move forward, and actually it's probably, this sounds really awful, doesn't it? But it's the sector does need a boot up the bum some days, and I think that's what we got. So we're getting better, but I think also we understood we had to work with our partners. So where we were working in a live school, working in a live hospital, those are very real situations we faced in COVID. And it was about not only how do we keep ourselves safe, but how do we keep the public safe? How do we keep those key workers safe? And where we were working within an A&E department, that's a real challenge for us and the people running that hospital. And I think that's where collaboration came. That's where great communication came into effect. And we don't want to lose any of that. So, there are loads of other examples, but
it's staggering, isn't it, to think back 14 months or so, Richard, and remember how little we knew about what was going on, how little information there was available to us. But you mentioned collaboration. Now, when we're talking about the Growth Board, there's a sort of slightly skeptical view that might say, look, this is just another layer of bureaucracy and administration over the kind of development business. And the last thing you need is more people sort of getting involved. How are you finding the Growth Board as a delivery mechanism? What's the sort of private sector view?
It feels different. It feels different from the past, and it feels different because I know Patsy has spent a long time trying to make sure the leaders of all the councils come together, and you've got agreement and you've got authority to move things forward, which means that when we speak to Patsy or we speak to one of the councillors, is that we know actually we're now going into kind of this more cohesive unit that we can talk to. I certainly saw it as a place when I kind of learned about this maybe a year ago, it was a place where we can kind of bring some information and evidence, which is exactly what, again, the local authorities need, is they want information and evidence so that they can make more informed decisions. And that's exactly what the Growth Board for me is all about, is making better quality informed decisions where partners, as Wilmot Dixon or other private sector partners can bring that information to the table and say, we know you've got a problem, here's a way of solving it. That might go into your melting pot so that out the other side, we've then all got something that we can all work together. And what we really want is that good quality medium and long-term planning, because when we know that's in place, we start to invest in new people, new technologies, new products, new ways of doing things. Construction sector is rapidly evolving into a digital space, but that's quite expensive for us to invest in because we don't quite know how it's going to pay back. But by working with other partners, maybe in film or working with the universities, we can actually share that learning. So maybe it's slightly less risky for us, which means also we can then bring more benefits to the table. So, I'm a fan of people getting together and sharing their ideas. Sometimes you have to give a little to get something back. So I kind of see this more as a long-term investment in moving forward. And I'd rather, and I think Councillor White put it earlier nicely, was this isn't a competition between the local authorities anymore. This is a place where they recognise that someone living in Hertford, someone living in St Albans might be working in Hitchin. So actually my choices need to affect both of those locations. And that's only going to happen if St Albans Council talk to North Herts District Council. That's what the board's about. So clarity, surety.
Good stuff. Thanks very much. Chris, you wanted to mention something.
Yeah, I think it goes beyond that, of course. I mean, yes, there are people in St Albans working in Hitchin and vice versa. But of course, there are people in St Albans working in London and Oxford and Cambridge and all sorts of other places, maybe not every day. And one of the things the Growth Board has got to do and is thinking about is relations with London. St Albans, for instance, is 20 minutes away. It's one stop from St Albans to St Pancras, and it's less than 20 minutes. Does that have an impact? Of course, it's a massive impact. And I know, for instance, the Francis Crick Institute is at that first stop. Is that a tie-in that we should do? Probably. And you can say the same about Watford, you can say the same about Stevenage, and indeed many other places in the county. So recognising strategic relations with other strategic bodies is going to be essential to this as well.
Great stuff. Thanks, Chris. Richard.
Yeah, just briefly from me, I was chatting with Patsy earlier, and we've got the Hertfordshire Infrastructure Development Board. Now, that really does sound dry, but we have got something like 60 organisations have already signed up to that, to want to take part, because they can see a future whereby if these organisations can understand our certainty and collective will, then it is worth working together. And I think that's the big difference. Sort of the nod to Richard E's point is that it is different. This is not just the public sector imposing via government some kind of quasi set of rules, but actually let's think through what's best for Hertfordshire and let's do that collectively. And so the housing prospectus, for example, I mean, we haven't got into that here, but that is an ask of government for £470 million so that we can get development right in the county. Not so that we can get it wrong, not so that we can just accept what comes down the track at us, but actually we can guide and lead and build better. And within that, there's all sorts of very practical things. But one of those is, some of that funding is so we can get more social housing into development. So actually we just start to tick off the things. What do we want? Well, we want more of this. Well, how much is that going to cost? Well, let's get it in there then. And then the Hertfordshire Growth Board is advocating on behalf of those 1.2 million people who are all worried sick about what development is going to look like in Hertfordshire. So I think I hope it's a virtual circle, and I hope our residents will understand that whilst they will probably never fully understand what the Hertfordshire Growth Board is really about, but there is an organisation that's working, the leadership of that organisation is working really hard to make sure that we land the best possible growth and investment into the county.
Yeah, well said, Richard. Thank you. And Richard Davidson, I just wanted to come back to you briefly, just to kind of give us an end point on this, which is from the private sector's point of view, as an investment opportunity, as a development opportunity, on your radar, how significant is Hertfordshire for an organisation the scale of Wilmot Dixon?
I guess given that we've been here nearly 170 years, probably says a lot about our organisation. I think it's fair to say is that as we see more of these plans come together, it becomes more appetizing and more interesting. And I think we've all of the panelists have cited other companies investing locally, investing in Hertfordshire with a great quality skills base of employees and some great natural assets and heritage. So I think everything is coming together quite nicely. I think if you'd asked me the question 4 years ago, I probably would have had a very different answer. So I think it's good to see things moving forward together. So that gives you confidence to invest your money and your people and your assets here rather than somewhere else.
I think that's a really appropriate last word for us. Viewers, while you join me in thanking our brilliant panel for sharing their valuable time with us today, we've run one poll which says that you'd like to see more webinars, so we're going to be back on the 2nd of November with the next in this series of webinars. We also got our one-to-one live interview with Councillor Richard Roberts tomorrow, so the details in the chat for both of those events, and you can sign up for those now. But in the meantime, I think it's fair to say that our panel is leaving us with a sense of optimism about the future of Hertfordshire, and I hope, viewers, they've given you an appetite for working with the Hertfordshire Growth Board to secure that future. So on your behalf, viewers, thank you to Councillor Richard Roberts of Hertfordshire County Council. Thank you to Councillor Sharon Taylor, OBE from Stevenage Borough Council. Thank you to Councillor Chris White of St Albans City and District Council. And thank you to Patsy Dale from the Hertfordshire Growth Board. And thank you, Richard Davidson of Wilmot Dixon, both for your contribution to the conversation and for sponsoring this event and making it possible. But most of all, always, viewers, as ever, thank you for tuning in again and for gracing us with your attention and fueling the conversation with lots of stimulating questions. We've got a few left hanging, so if you join our LinkedIn Members Club, you'll find any answers from our panel circulated there over the coming days. Now, as I said, we'll be back tomorrow with Richard for a wide-ranging one-to-one interview about his career and ambitions for Hertfordshire, and on the 2nd of November with the second in this series of webinars. So register for those in the chat now. And while you're doing that, I will say from our excellent panel, from Wilmot Dixon, from me and from everyone at 3 Fox, good afternoon.